There are a couple of things that I need to do to prepare for this fly. One is to take a single hurl off of the eye of a peacock feather. And I need to strip all the little barbules off that hurl, so I'm just going to use an eraser. Now there's obviously other ways to do this, and if you want to do it in mass, there is a chemical way of doing it, and you can look that up if you want to find out more about how to get all the barbules off of the peacock hurl. But for just a single fly or just a handful of flies, I'll just take my eraser and erase off all those little fibers. I call those barbules. That's what, on a feather, the barbs are each individual fiber, sometimes we call them, and then all the tiny little fibers on each barb are the barbules. The other piece of preparation is the wings, which will be duck quill. That's a second way that we use the word quill. It's the barbs from the duck feather, and I am taking a hook and I'm going to measure how wide I want that by sliding my hook through that piece of the feather and separating that out. And what I need is 4 of those, because this is going to be what's called a double slipped wing. And then I'll measure a second one. Oh, I could guess at the size of these also, or just estimate, but this is one way to get slips that are exactly the size that you want them. And then I will take those 2 slips and stack them together. And set those aside. Then I'm going to take the opposite wing, or an opposite wing. Take an opposite wing, and I'll do the same thing. I'll measure how wide I want my slip, and I'll cut that out. And I'll do a second one of those. And I'll take those 2 and stack them together. And then I'm going to turn my first ones upside down so that the back side of the feather is up. And then I'll take my second ones and do that so that they're going the opposite direction. And then I have what is going to be double slipped wings. And you can see how they flare apart. And then I'll be tying those onto the hook shank with the tips pointing up and splayed like that. So I'll have 2 slips on this side and 2 slips on this side, and that's called a double slip wing. This is a Walt and Winnie Dette blue quill. It is a dry fly in the Catskill tradition, part of the early traditional Catskill dry flies. I'm tying it on a number 14 hook with beige thread. I'm going to bring my thread back to what I call, or what Randall Kaufman calls, the 80% mark of the hook, where I will tie in the wings. I have the slips that I have prepared. I want the wings to be about the shank length, so I'm tying them pointed side up, and I will pinch wrap. So grab that thread between my finger and thumb, pull down, and then pull back up and cinch it. And I'm still laying over so that I can twist my wing back up like I want it. I'm going to wrap forward a little bit because I'm kind of behind that 80%, but it's close enough. Then I'll wrap back on the ends of those slips, quill slips, and cut that off at an angle. That will help with creating a tapered body. I'll go ahead and wrap that in now. I'm going to bring my thread back up, and then I'll grab those wings and pull back on them and wrap underneath of them. Nice and tight right in that little crevice, and that will help stand those wings up. And then I want them separated, so I'm going to take a pointy object, bring it down between the two sets. So again, this is double slipped, so there are two quills on each side. And then in order to keep them separated, I will cross wrap. So take my thread, kitty corner, X, cross wrap through, and that will help separate them. And then I can just grab them all together again and wrap under them to get them to stand up. And over manipulating on those wings does tend to kind of separate the barbs, but we're going to live with it. I'll bring my thread back to the back, come back down about halfway where I'm going to tie in the tail. It is called a blue quill, so I'm using light blue dun for the tail, and I will be using that same color for the hackle. Go ahead and wrap in on that. Can wrap underneath of it also to help it stand up. And then I'm going to sneak my scissors in here behind the wings and clip off those butt ends of the tail feather, tail barbs. Wrap up over that to get it to lay down nice. Then I will take the peacock quill that I've stripped and lay that just against the shank body, wrap down over it and tie it in, come back to the tail, bring my thread back up. I'm going to actually bring it up in front here, get it out of the way, put my hackle plier on that stripped hurl. So we're using the word quill in two different ways. We're talking about the wings as duck quill, and then we're talking about the body as a stripped quill. And I go back and forth about how I do this wrapping. I found that on this particular fly, it works better for me just to grab it with the hackle pliers and do touching wraps up the body with it. It could be wrapped also by using the rotary tool on the vise, or the rotary aspect of the vise. I'll bring my thread back to behind the wing where I will catch that off. And that quill that comes from the eye of the peacock has that bicolor to it, I guess I'll call it. It's kind of light on one side and dark on the other, or edge, so that when it gets wrapped in, you do get that little sense of segmentation between the light and the dark. I'll clip out the extra, if I can grab it here. And I've got one wing barb down here I want to get rid of now. So I have a light blue done, hackle feather. I'm going to give it a crew cut. Just clip right next to the stem. Get little short barbs. Those little short barbs just give me something to catch in with. I'll lay that against the shank of the hook up here behind the eye, and then my thread will grab that end that's been clipped. And then I'll bring my thread behind also, because I'm going to wrap the hackle behind the wings, and so I want to tie it in there too. I'll grab that hackle with my hackle pliers and hackle wrap it. So I'll do a couple of behind the wing wraps, and then I'll bring it up in front of the wing and wrap as much room and or feather or both that I have, and then I can wrap up over the tip of that hackle feather. I do 3 wraps over the top, let go of it, pull it all back. If I need to wet my fingers, I can. It worked this time just to grab and pull back. Wrap the head, find that hackle feather tip, and snap it out. Just kind of fix those wings. And let's see if we can do a whip finish in here without catching in hackle barbs. So if I set up my whip finisher, and then I can pull back on everything. Yeah, those barbs at the bottom don't like to be pulled back, but I'm going to work around them. And get a few wraps of the whip finisher. Looks like I've managed to keep a fairly clean eye. Just set my scissors against the thread and push. Sharp scissors will just cut that thread that way. And then since I'm not scissoring, then I am not going to cut other stuff out from around the hackle. I use a diluted goop for head cement. Stick a needle in my jar, drop that on the head of the fly. That'll penetrate, hold that knot, and dry clear. If I'm concerned about the eye being dirty, I can grab a hackle feather and drop it down through the eye. And that will clean it out and make sure that I can get a tippet in there. A Walt and Winnie Dette blue quill dry fly with the double slip wings.